It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. Today is another episode of Frontline Friday with my very special guest and regular guest, Bridget Gleason. Bridget, how are you this morning?
I'm doing super. Good morning.
Good. That's good to hear. So I think we did an episode without a weather report. How's the weather where you are?
How could we have done that?
I don't know.
You've got to go back.
We'll get emails from the listeners there.
Exactly, saying we don't know what the weather is, and we need to know. Weather here in California is beautiful. There was a little bit of rain this morning when I was out running, but it looks clear and nice and all good. Can't complain. What about you, Andy? Where are you today?
Where in the world is Andy Paul?
That's the first thing we need to know.
Right. I'm in my San Diego office today.
Very nice.
Not a cloud in the sky down here today. So it's very nice.
That's very nice.
Yeah. Nice to escape from New York where spring hasn't really made up its mind whether it wants to make an appearance or not.
Well, and didn't in Southern California, I don't know if you were there last week, didn't they also, wasn't spring struggling to make her appearance also in Southern California last week? Wasn't it a bit rainy?
Actually, I was up in your neck of the woods last week in the Bay Area, so it was raining. Yes, we're in the San Francisco area. So
yeah.
So anyway, so today I thought we'd do is you and I we talk at public events and certainly attend a lot of conferences and work with clients and companies that you advise and I advise, and we hear a lot of sort of common questions from sales managers, sales leaders, CEOs, entrepreneurs about sales. And I thought we would take on some of those questions today that sort of the most common ones and sort of talk through them.
Great.
So the ones that I've heard a lot recently has to do with how do I design an effective compensation plan for my sales team? One that, achieves my goals.
Andy, can we get a real expert to talk about this one? This is so vexing. And I hear this one a lot as well. And it's one of these that, I don't know if anybody has really cracked the code on designing a great
sales compensation plan.
Yeah, I mean, what would you say about that?
Well, let's think about a different question, sort of aligned with this topic, is because I raise this all the time with companies. Mm-hmm. Do you even need a sales compensation plan? I mean, do you need to pay commission to your sales reps?
It's interesting that you asked that. I have a startup that is kind of going back and forth on that one as we speak. They traditionally haven't. And they're wondering if that helps or hurts. You create a different, I think you're going to get a different kind of person. And I don't think that's necessarily good or bad. I think that just is. If it's a flat rate, regardless of what you bring in or not, versus somebody that really is looking to go, they want to know that if they work 14-hour days, that they potentially could make more money than the people that aren't.
Well, I think
what would you say? What would you say about that?
Well, I think it's a cultural issue, right?
Yeah,
because you start creating a divide between sales and everybody else when sales gets paid commission, which is not necessarily bad in all cases. But I harken back to an example of a company I worked for a couple of decades ago, actually, where I came on board and started a division of the company, and we were selling sort of custom products. It was large development projects doing on a custom basis for customers. That these products would then go on to become standard products, but initially they were customized, and it really was very much of a team sale. I mean, it took engineering, customer support, executive team, sales, and so on. It's sort of prototypical large complex sale. And in that environment, the CEO was really pretty clear, and which I thought was, very astute on his part, because this was very much of an engineering-driven company, as many tech companies were and are, and said, I can't justify to the engineers why I would pay commission to the sales rep because the engineers were as instrumental in getting this deal as the sales rep was. So in that case, it's really a cultural issue, is who did the work to help bring in the business, and a matter of treating everybody equitably. And so in that case, the sales reps were paid a nice salary. And a couple years down the road, where some of these products matured and became standard off-the-shelf products, then they could earn commission selling those.
So fundamentally, I like that model because I'm very much a believer that sales is the tip of the spear, but they're not the spear. And as you say, in most companies, well, in every company, sales is doing a piece of it, but they're not doing all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really want to foster this culture of everybody's in it together, then just having sales be yet another role. I mean, the only argument against that is salespeople get commission, but they're typically when you look at their OTE, it's because they're getting a salary typically half of what their OTE would be. So it's just how they're being paid. This was early on, where we offered the sales engineers an opportunity to be paid. Actually, I think they offered everybody in the company, it was a small company, to be paid the same way that sales were paid, so that you can have the upside as well.
Mm-hmm.
And no one else in the company wanted it. So they said, we would rather just know what our salary is and have the OTE be less than have there be the mix, than have there be the variable. So oftentimes other people in the company, they don't want they don't want that level of risk associated with their salary.
Well, I think that if you look at it in the context of, this might be something you do in an earlier stage company, right? As when you have less standard product, or the product requires more of a team effort to sell, then I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, but even in that company, the example I gave, we ultimately started paying commission once we had standard product. But in the early days, I mean, you don't want to pay your sales reps a draw or any of these other things that that oftentimes are asked for, because the product's so new and the sort of prospects are somewhat uncertain. So paying somebody a little bit higher salary up front and then over time shifting it to more of a variable seemed to be a good solution.
Yeah, and I've seen that too, Andy, and I definitely would recommend that. That seems like a good solution to me. And as you said, there are comp plans that make sense at different stages, at different times, in different situations, which, again, it's why there isn't a definitive source or comp plan that a company can roll out and say, this is what works for our company, because a lot of it has to do with what the objectives are for the company at a particular point in time.
Mm-hmm. And so another question that I get along the same line, and sort of the last one we'll take on compensation is do you have one plan for the entire sales team, or, and especially this is true against small and mid-sized companies, can certain reps have a different plan than other reps depending on the accounts they have and so on?
So I like simplicity. So I would like to say, yeah, just have one plan. I found that hard in reality. So sometimes it's you've got different plans because somebody is handling SMB and small accounts versus mid-size or larger accounts. Mm-hmm. Or maybe somebody's handling all inbound and somebody else is having to do outbound, which may be harder to get into.
So it's okay to have different plans for people doing different jobs within sales.
I think so. I think it needs to be. I think to have everybody on the same plan, again, while I like the simplicity, I think it's hard to execute fairly.
All right. I like that. I agree. Done the same thing myself. All right. So another interesting topic, it's somewhat aligned with what we just talked about, and this again, that's more of a small and mid-size company problem, perhaps, is, I'll call it title creep in sales. I see this a lot of times in smaller companies as they bestow titles on salespeople that it's sort of a form of implicit compensation. I guess the salesperson thinks they need to have a more important sounding title in order to sound worthy of the customer's time.
Gosh, this one, I have been asked about this and at every...
A bazillion times.
A bazillion times. So this is really very relevant, very germane. So it's basically when a salesperson wants either a manager role or a director role.
At least by title.
Yeah, they want some title. Sometimes it's for internal reasons, like they feel like they deserve, hey, I'm doing the job of a director, give me a director title.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they want it for external reasons. If I'm going to be interacting with these VPs, then I need something. I need them to know that I'm, at their level. So I need at least to be a director.
So do you buy that argument? I don't buy that argument personally. I think that that buyers are very rarely fooled by a title. I mean, they know.
I agree. For the external, for sure, they know. And what is a VP at one company could be a senior manager at a large company. I mean, so I think that's one thing that I also find it when hiring, I was going to say, is some people tell me, but I was a director here, I was a VP here, I don't want to go backwards. So, well, you were a VP at a 6-person startup, and now you're going to a 300-person company. You're not going to be a VP. It's so you can either stay with a small company or understand that here translates to a senior director role.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the lessons for managers that are listening to this is that it seems like easy currency to give away when you're hiring people to bestow titles on somebody. Situations you just talked about, somebody wanting the VP title. You're not doing them any favors, for one. And two is you're not doing yourself a favor, because it's just going to make your life more complicated as you continue to grow. I've seen this in startup after startup they hired somebody early on as a VP just because it was easy to make them a VP, but then as the company grows, this person's out of their depth altogether.
Yeah,
but they've got this title, and suddenly readjusting that for them, especially if they're making a great contribution to the company, but they're just haven't grown with the company. They didn't have the capabilities of growing with the company, but the job they do is important. They do a good job. I've seen this a number of times, but rarely does the person want to stick around when their title's downgraded. But if they had been brought in at the appropriate level and done the great job and rewarded as such, there wouldn't have been a problem.
Yeah, there was one client that I had when I was consulting, Andy, and I worked with this client who shall remain nameless for about 4 years. And I watched the title creep, and it was humorous really to watch, where they started giving director titles like they were going out of business. Mm-hmm. So they started giving director titles, and then the director said, well, hey, we've got so many directors, I need to be a VP. And then you had this large group of VPs, and then one person was promoted to a SVP. And then pretty soon you saw, and sometimes, Andy, it was funny, I think the VP of marketing just took the title and changed it on the website, and suddenly he was SVP. And then you got all these SVPs. And then people started clamoring and say, well, I think I need a C. I want to be the CTO, the CRO, the CFO, the CIO, and I thought, God, this is so funny just to watch over the course of 4 years how this issue of giving the titles away too easily just creates this title creep that at the end of the day doesn't doesn't really mean anything, and actually creates a lot of problems internally.
Yeah, so I think the bottom line lesson is that if you're hiring a sales rep and they say they need a title so that the buyer will respect them, then you've got the wrong person for the job.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Because the buyer sees through it anyway. They know where the authority sits. I mean, they know if it's just a title or if it's actually a thing.
Right.
So, yeah, you're not doing that person a favor. And if they think they need that to make themselves more, to be able to open doors and talk to more people, we know that doesn't work either.
Correct.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be back talking about more questions we've been hearing recently in sales. Frontline Friday with my guest, Bridget Gleason. Hi, this is Andy. Connect and Sell is used by sales reps at nearly 1,000 companies, including hundreds of technology startups and several Fortune 500 companies, to overcome the challenges of getting prospects on the phone. Companies using Connect and Sell grow their revenues faster by enabling their sales reps to have more sales conversations in 90 minutes than they could otherwise achieve in an entire week. Connect and Sell can be deployed directly to your sales reps, or you can take advantage of their outbound on-demand service, which delivers qualified prospect meetings scheduled directly on your sales reps' calendars. Visit connectandsell.com to learn more about how Connect and Sell can start filling your pipeline today. All right, welcome back. Frontline Friday, we're talking about hard sales questions that sales management questions we've been hearing recently. Yeah, we've talked about how to design a sales compensation plan that works, which we sort of answered. We talked about title creep in sales. So next one's a hard question, and I get asked this frequently: is how do you terminate an underperforming sales rep? This is a really hard task. I mean, terminating anybody, you're messing with people's lives. It's a difficult task, but how do you do that? And how do you, maybe another parallel question that comes along with that is, how do you know that you've seen enough that the person can't turn it around, that it's the time to make that decision?
Yeah, and unfortunately, if you do this job for any length of time, the job being a VP of sales job or a manager, director job where you're managing people, you're going to have to learn how to do this, how to terminate employees and how to do it effectively. And your last question on there is, how do you know when you've given it enough time? And I think one of the important things is, I don't want anyone to be surprised if there's going to be a termination. Sometimes it's if there's a layoff is different than if it's performance related.
Yeah, let's stick with performance related.
Yeah. So with performance related, it's the job of the manager to set clear expectations, both activity related as well as results related, and that those are reviewed on a periodic basis. And when I say periodic, I mean no more time, no lengthier than weekly. So there should be frequent, and a sales rep should know how they stack and what they're doing. I know a lot of people here use, or who are listening, use Salesforce. We have we call it a standards of performance dashboard. And we talked in an earlier episode, Andy, about books we like. And one of the ones that we talked about was Bill Walsh and The Score Takes Care of Itself, and this notion of standards of performance. And the reason I put that into place is so that a rep can see on his dashboard every day, every minute, red, yellow, green, where they are in terms of my expectations, in activities, in results, and there are no surprises. And it gives a manager the opportunity to talk about, this is where you are, how do we get better, and putting plans in place to how we can improve on these different things. In terms of how long do you give it, I think that probably needs to be answered with some context How long does it take other similar people to do it? Is there a certain ramp that you expect? What's the context in terms of how long it's taken other people to do it? But I would say within the first 3 months, sometimes within the first month, you can tell.
When they're a new employee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about somebody that maybe you need to do a turnaround on.
So someone who's been doing well and the performance falters.
Right.
Yeah, well, I would say that within a quarter.
Yeah, I think that...
If I just have a gut for, again, not having context around a particular situation.
Yeah, I think
I would say within a quarter.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is really a tough topic because, yeah, any rep that fails, I've always seen as a personal failure. Either I made a mistake in hiring the person, or I haven't done a good enough job coaching and managing the person to help them succeed. And I think it's an aspect that managers oftentimes don't look at, is when someone's struggling, is to look at what you yourself are doing first to help them. And it may be one thing to say, yeah, I'm going through the motions, we've got our weekly one-on-ones, and I do coaching, blah, blah, blah. But, are you putting that extra effort in to help, especially if you think the person, it's a situation where maybe they were doing well before, and suddenly they're not doing as well, or that you hired somebody that you thought had great potential, great track record, and something just isn't clicking in your environment, is you got to look at what you're doing first and foremost and say, okay, am I doing everything I should do? Am I being clear enough with this person what the expectations are? Am I devoting the right amount of time to them to help them understand exactly what works in this environment? Have I modeled the behaviors, with customers? Have I observed some of their calls? Have I taken them on calls and, shown them how to do it? Have you taken the steps that really required? Because you've made a big investment to hire this person. If they've been on board for a while, you've made a big investment in onboarding them. You need to make sure you put enough time into making sure that you've done what you can do to salvage them.
I couldn't agree more with that. I always tell my team and my managers, my reps, that it's my job to make them successful. That's my job. So I also feel like the first thing to look at is, what am I doing or not doing, particularly if it's a frontline manager for me, and what are the managers doing or not doing to help enable someone to be successful. I think that's a really, really, the first place to look when someone is struggling is, have we given them what they need? Have we enabled them to be successful? And if not, what can we be doing to help them achieve what we want them to achieve?
Especially if you're in an environment where you have a rigorous hiring process, as it sounds like you do, then somebody gets by that screening and gets on board and it's not working, then it's really, you have to to stop and think, okay, well, what could we be doing better for this person? Because we thought they were worth the effort and the investment to bring on board. Right.
And then, like you said, if there is something wrong and you do need to terminate them, looking at, was it a hiring issue? Was it a miss somehow? And if it was a miss in the hiring, why was that? And what do we need to do? What do we need to look for, do differently? Because it's painful. I mean, if it's costly and painful and disruptive to bring somebody on that doesn't work, you look at it from a rep's perspective, and let's magnify that. It's a lot more disruptive for the individual when it doesn't work out.
Oh, yeah. I think we all have horror stories about, letting people go and finding out that there's things going on behind the scene in their personal lives and others that maybe if you had spent more time, you might have found out that were really, and, you couldn't do anything about those. You can't take on all that. But yeah, we've all had that stories, that I said, very disruptive of people's lives. But I think the message I have for people is as you said, the standards of performance, your dashboard, your metrics are so important. But even in there, it may be telling you a different story than just this person isn't working. It's this person needs to learn more about what it takes to do this job, and then the metrics may start having more relevance for them.
Yeah, and the metrics really are meant to be a guidepost. To if in the case of SumoLogic and the standards of performance dashboard, red, yellow, green, if I see a lot of reds, it's a signal, it's a warning, it's something's not working. And what is it? Is it the process? Is it the training? Is it the enablement? Is it the person? Is it the coaching? What is it? Something's not working. And it's really meant to be that. It's not meant to be a punishing tool, but rather what I tell the managers is and the reps is this is really designed so that I know how to help, I know where to help and how to help.
Interesting.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, and sort of last point on this is, and it's sort of interesting, I was at a conference recently and listening to speakers talk about influence of big data in sales, and you really got the sense from certain of the speakers that, there's this trend to sort of diminish the importance of this sort of one-on-one coaching, managing aspect of the management job in favor of, hey, this is what the numbers say. And boy, those weekly one-on-ones you do, those are pointless because now we've got these, predictive analytics. They're going to tell us all this information about the forecast and the pipeline. And it seems like, that's I don't think the personal part's ever going to go away. And if it does, it's to your peril.
I think the personal part will go away when there are robots doing the job. But until then, the personal part's not going to go away. We're humans. There's just the fundamental of who we are and how we operate. And that will not go away. And so I agree with you. The human element will continue to be important until you've got bots doing it, and then bots don't need it. But humans need it.
Yeah, and I agree. That's not going to change. And it's, again, you take that pure data approach at your peril because you're just going to chew up and grind through people and ultimately be creating the culture that's not the one you want within your company.
Or that people will not want to stay in. They're not going to want to stay in it, in that kind of a culture.
Yeah, and so, again, a cautionary tale for people listening is, data's great, use it effectively. But there's a lot of managers I know that are uncomfortable with the coaching and the managing aspect of it. Yeah, it's not an excuse to lose yourself in the numbers and not do the other. You really need to step up to the bar. Do the coaching that's really
Correct.
required.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Well, Bridget, another great episode.
And likewise, Andy, I look forward to the next one.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody, for listening again. And Bridget, thank you.
Wonderful. Have a great week.
All right. Talk to everybody soon. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.